in this lesson, we're going to be taking a look at pages 34 and 35 and learning how to play Merrily We Roll Along and Largo. By the way, just a spoiler alert, but Merrily is just Mary Had a Little Lamb. But we'll get there in a moment. The first thing we want to take a look at are these two important chords on page 34. One of them you already know from our work on pages 32 and 33, specifically with that C major chord, or as you now know, the C major triad. So that's here. The other chord that's new to this page is called the G7 chord, and the way that it's shown here using the bass staff, so as a result the left hand, is to have your fifth finger move down from C3, right? That's where the note C is after all. Remember the white key to the left of the group of two black keys. You move your fifth finger down a half step, or just one step down to B, and your second and first finger remain on F and G as they would in that five-finger position. So what this means is your fifth finger, there it is, stretched out, moves down from C to B. Right, remember if this is C3, that is B2, fifth finger on B2, and your second finger and your thumb, your first finger, on F and G, as they normally would be in this five-finger position. So basically, think about your fifth finger stretching to the left, and then 2 and 1 on F and G, and you play those three notes simultaneously, B, F, G. What I tend to say to my students is, if you know the Roald Dahl book, Big Friendly Giant, remember, B, F, G, Big Friendly Giant, here it is. And that's the G7 chord. And here's the C major triad. Now you might be wondering, why is this called the G7 chord? So that will take a little bit of explanation that the book doesn't offer, but I'm not the book. I'll give you a little bit more. So we have talked about triads as being a group of notes, which is what a chord is, that are specifically arranged as skips in relation to one another, or an interval of a size 3. So for example, let me move everything up to this fourth octave using my left hand. So we've got C, skip up to E, skip up to G. So that's called a triad because it's three notes arranged as skips in relation to one another, built from a root, the lowest note of those skips, which in this case is C. So that's why it's called a C triad. Okay? Or in this case, a C major triad, because we have a configuration of a major third below a minor third. Okay, as simple as that. Review the previous lesson on pages 32 and 33 if you want that, if you want me to go into more detail for that, or if you need to review it. Now let's talk about the G7 chord. So I'm going to switch over to my right hand, and I'm going to do the same exercise that we did with the C chord, but now my root, my starting point will be G. So I'm going to start with my thumb on G. I'm going to skip up to B, and skip up again to D, and play those harmonically or at the same time. And that's the G triad, right? Three notes arranged as skips, rooted on the note G, and maybe you recognize that there's some similarity between the G sound and the sound on C, because these are both major triads. From G to B is a major third, which just means there are 4 half steps from G up to B, and those are qualified as major. And the third means that we just have a size of 3 from G up to B. 1, 2, 3. How do I know this is 4 half steps? From G up to G sharp is 1. From G sharp up to A is 2. From A up to A sharp is 3. And A sharp up to B is 4. Major third. Get that sound in your ear. Right, it's a very kind of warm sound, a sunny sound, but those of course are subjective. Technically, it's a major third because it's a skip with 4 half steps. let's take a look at B up to D. Remember, that's the other part of this triad. B up to D has 3 half steps, which you can readily see if you count. B up to C is 1 half step, C up to C sharp is a 2nd half step, and C sharp up to D is the 3rd half step. So this is not a major third with 4 half steps, but a minor third. Remember, minor means smaller. That's a minor third. So moving it down an octave, maybe this will be a little more, a little easier to perceive because it's not quite so high. A minor third. Minor third. So you put a major third below a minor third, and you've got a major triad rooted, remember, built from G. Now, this still isn't getting to what the G7 chord is. So we're going to do one more little thing. We're going to take these 3 notes, the triad, and we're going to extend it with one more third or one more skip. So I'm going to go from D and skip up to F, right? D, E, F. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now I have 3 skips all put together, all assembled into a chord, not with 3 notes, but with 4 notes. Here are my 3 skips, G up to B, B up to D, and D up to F. Put them all together, you see the 4 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is called a G7 chord. Now, it's not a triad because obviously tri means 3. This is actually called a tetrachord because tetra means 4, right? So it's really simple in terms of this terminology. A chord, a group of notes. A group of notes that have 4 members, right? That was so complicated. Why did I say it that way? A group of 4 notes. That would be the easier way to say that. That's called a tetrachord. Here it is. And why is this thing called a G7 chord? Well, first of all, it's rooted on G. It's a series of skips, and let's take a look at the interval from the lowest note, G, to the last note, F. Well, if you're already ahead of me, and I hope you are, you should get a size from G up to F of 7 letters, or 7 natural or white keys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? G, A, B, C, D, E, F. So this is a G7 chord. But that's not what you're playing when you are looking at pages 34 and 35 and the next several pages going forward, as long as we stick to that C position. So essentially what's happening here, let me switch over to my left hand. Here's that G7 chord. This time, instead of starting on G4, I'll start with my 5th finger on G3. Right, there it is. Well, I'm going to take out the D. No more D. And now I'm going to rearrange those 3 notes so that B is on the bottom, right, the lowest note, or what's called the bass note, because bass just means the lowest note. And then I'm going to move F and G above it. Now, this kind of reordering or permutation, it has a name in music theory. It's called inversion. So if this, and remember, I'm taking out the D, no more D. This is what's called root position, because the root, remember that's G, is on the bottom. The root is in the bass. And then when I reorder so that the G is no longer on the bottom, remember I skipped the D, this is called inversion. Now I'll have a separate lesson on the details of root position and inversion and all the specific names that these permutations receive. But all I want you to understand for now is that this tetrachord, which of course is missing the D, so it's not a triad because it still is understood as a 4-note entity, just with a missing or omitted D, has now been rotated permuted, inverted, so that B is in the bass on the bottom, and the other remaining notes, F and G, are on top. So technically, this is not really a G7 chord and nothing else. This is what's called a G7 chord over its bass note, its lowest note, which is B. So this is G7 over B, because it's not in root position. It's inverted. Okay, so I'm going to move this back down to the position indicated by the authors of the book, which place, again, this G7 chord, remember it's really a G7 over B, this G7 chord in the third octave with that B technically in the second octave. Okay, so that's down here, right? Our C3 position, fifth finger extends down to B, second finger over F, and thumb or first finger over G. G7 over B. Okay, so hopefully you feel pretty good about these two chords. Now let's play them. So a good exercise is simply to alternate between the C major triad that you've already learned. Remember, in that third position, third octave position, alternating with the G7 chord over B. I don't know why I'm whispering, but maybe because it's just not written in the book yet. And then back to your known C major triad. And so the reason the book gives you that G7 chord inverted, right, so that B is in the bass, is really simple. It's because you don't have to move around so much to go from C major to G7 back to C. So you can see here, let me move this up to the fourth octave. It might be a bit clearer. You can see really carefully how, here's my C major triad. My thumb doesn't go anywhere. My second finger comes down to F, and my fifth finger, there's my pinky, you can see it, it extends down a half step to B. So I have minimal motion, minimal movement to get to my G7 chord over B. And back to C. So this is why I want you to practice. Go back to your third octave as indicated in the book and play C. Lift slightly. Prepare your hand for G7 over B. Okay, I'm going to stop doing that. It was funny maybe the first time, and now it's not even funny to me anymore. G7. Lift and back to C. Okay, so let's do that according to the exercise at the bottom of page 34. So same three chords, and each one is held for 4 beats because of the time signature 4/4 and the whole notes indicated. So we're going to count 4 beats for each chord, and then because we've got those dots at the end, we're going to repeat. So here we go, starting with C. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release. And then we'll do it again, but just for the sake of time, I think you get it. You could definitely do the repetition. So one thing I just want to add before we go over to page 35 and start playing these pieces is that you've probably noticed that there's one additional piece of information here that we haven't seen before in this book, and that's something called a chord symbol. It's just a shortcut for musicians to quickly see what chord they have to play, and it sits on top of the staff and tells you what the chord is. C triad, G7 tetrachord, and C triad. So when you see this, sorry, C, get it? Okay. When you see it, you will, okay. It's not funny. I have to tell myself, this is not funny. When you see it, C, G7, and C, you will have a visual shortcut to the actual notation. So how does that manifest here on page 35? Well, take a look. In the first system of Merrily We Roll Along, heretofore will be, I'll refer to it as Merrily, C, G7, C. Now that doesn't mean that the chord is necessarily in the right or the left hand. It just means somewhere in this vicinity you're going to be playing that harmony, that group of simultaneously sounded notes. So you can see it right there, the C chord, the G7, and the C. And all supported, of course, by the chord symbol. And it's got that little red asterisk which asks you to look at the bottom of the page, and it tells you exactly what I just told you, that these are symbols telling you what chord to play, but also something known as chord changes, okay, which a lot of improvising musicians know about, jazz musicians know about this. So this is a bit of a foray into that kind of music, okay, or that kind of notation. In addition to staff notation, there's also the chord symbol. All right, so I think we're ready to go over to page 35. So we've learned the two new chords, one new chord, because the other chord, the C major triad, we introduced in a previous lesson. So we've got our two chords, C major triad and the G7 over B tetrachord. So the other new thing that we have to look at is highlighted with this box at the top of the page, and those are ties. But if you were really following my previous lesson carefully, the one on pages 32 and 33, I want to just refer back to that for a moment. I previewed the idea of a tie when I was discussing this interesting idea of when you have, or the interesting technique, that when you have a unison, right? This is C4, and this first beat of this measure is also C4, right? That's a unison. What I said is, you have to lift your finger off the key in order to re-articulate or repeat the second unison, right? The second note. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck. If you remember, I kind of mentioned it at like a trampoline effect. Up, down, right? A kind of buoyancy or a lightness. Just review that lesson. What if you got stuck? Then you would have a tie. So let's take a look. Here on page 35, you can certainly read this. What is it? What's a tie? A tie is when you extend the duration of one rhythm by the duration of the second rhythm to which it is tied. By default, you can only tie the same pitches to one another, because if I'm extending the duration of C by, let's say that this is a whole note with 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I want to extend it by the value of another whole note, an additional 4 beats. It has to be the same note. There's no way that I can change the notes and at the same time extend the rhythm. It just doesn't make any sense. So I have to extend the value of the same letter in the same octave. So if I have a whole note tied to a whole note, the combined value, rhythmic or durational value, is 4 beats plus 4 beats. So that's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just so you're clear, if I get rid of that, if I nix that tie, what will these two have, whole notes, what will these two whole notes sound like? I'll just re-articulate when I come back to the first beat of the next cycle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so hopefully you understand that, again, a tie is just a rhythmic extension. So looking at these two measures right there, I will not be playing the C major triad again in measure number 2 because it's tied over from measure number 1. So to play these two measures in the left hand alone, here's what you do. You play the C major chord, which you know well, and I start counting. I'll give you the preparatory beats. You're going to hold it for 2 cycles of 4 beats. So let's practice doing that together. These are the first 2 measures with the left hand on the C major triad. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, release. Please do not play the second measure like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. You get it. Because that means that you've ignored the ties and you've re-articulated this chord starting on the first beat of measure number 2. That's not what it says to do. And of course, the same thing is true in the second system with the first 2 measures. In fact, you know what? Let's save ourselves a lot of time. Look at the left hand. Again, there's that bass clef. Look at the left hand for system number 1 and look at the left hand for system number 2. It's the same. You've got the same chord changes, C, G7 over B, and C, C, G7, C. So once you learn the left hand here, you've learned it there. So why don't we just do that? In fact, we've already kind of learned it because compare these 4 measures to these 3 measures at the bottom of page 34. C, G7, C. The same exact progression of harmony of chords, C, G7, C, except the first C triad is extended by the ties for 1 additional measure of 4 beats. So let's just play the left hand for this first system. We know how it goes. This chord, the C major triad for 2 complete measures, or 2 complete cycles of 4 beats, then we change to G7 for 1 cycle of 4, and then back to C for another cycle of 4. And of course, when I say a cycle of 4, I mean a cycle of 4 beats, right? And I know that they're 4 beats. I know that I'm really belaboring this, but I want you to be so clear about this because we've got a 4/4 time signature, and each beat is represented by the bottom number, which indicates a quarter, and these are all whole notes, which are durationally equivalent to 4 quarters. It's as simple as that. So let's play the first system, left hand only. I'm going to give you my preparations, my preparatory beats. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release. If you were looking carefully and listening carefully, you probably noticed that I wasn't being mechanically 1,000% correct or 100% correct. I didn't extend this C major triad completely through beat number 4 because I had to give myself a little bit of time, and this is really crucial, give yourself a little bit of time and space to lift the hand before coming down on beat 1 with the new chord or the chord change. And the same thing at the end of this measure, lift a little bit before you come down on the C major triad. So look again. Observe that when I get to the end of that 4th beat, 3, 4, lift, 1, 2, 3, 4, lift, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Don't be pedantic about this. You're not a machine. You have to lift and give the mechanism of the keyboard a bit of breathing room so that you can come up and come back down. Come up and come back down. It's really important, and you'll just feel a bit freer about these chord changes, not quite so dogmatic or pedantic about them. So we've learned the left hand, in essence, for this entire piece. Let's take a look at the right hand, right? Remember earlier that I said that it's called Merrily, we roll along, but it's really Mary had a little lamb. How do I know? Well, let's listen to it. Let's start by naming these pitches in the first 2 measures. Okay, so the first line in the treble clef, we know that that's E, down a step to D, down a step to middle C, C4, back up a step to D, back up a step to E, and then unisons, right? E, E, E. What's the fingering? 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3. What does that sound like? Okay, right hand in C4 position, 3 on E, 2 on D, 1 on C, we turn back around, 2 on D, 3 on E, and those unisons. Does that begin to sound like Mary Had a Little Lamb? Of course. Here it is in time, right? We're counting all those quarters and then the half note. 1, 2, ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, release. Right? You're probably singing this to yourself, da, 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 da. Well, that's exactly how it continues. Okay? So before we go on, let's start to kind of consolidate our learning. Right? We're pretty far into the book. I mean, this isn't page 20, this isn't page 14. We've done enough work together, and if you're following this playlist, then you're more than 40, that is 40, more than 40 videos in. So there's some things that we can start to accelerate in terms of how we learn this music. Before we go on, I'd like to figure out how to play the left and the right hand together. So let's try that right off the bat. So for the first two measures, the left hand only plays once. You put down that C major triad and you just let it be. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The right hand at the same time plays 1, 2, 3, 4, release. Let's try articulating them at the same time. There's only one gesture that you have to worry about that occurs simultaneously. That's the very first beat of the very first measure where the left and the right hand play together. After that, the left hand just sustains. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, so if you're having any trouble with that, remember two essential points. The left hand is kind of glued down. Once you play it, it stays down while the right hand is playing. So a good rule of thumb here, is to start with the first beat and play both hands together, and then release the right hand and keep the left hand down. Just like we did, by the way, just like I did in the previous lesson with Brother John, as well as Here's a Happy Song on page 33, where the left hand stays down and the right hand plays either after or at the same time, but is short. Okay, so you can always do this. Ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just to get used to the simultaneous articulation of both hands on beat number 1, and then the sustained left hand while the right hand does something different. So let's do that one more time, and then we're going to move on. So first two measures, both hands together, and one more detail that I'm sure you've noticed, mezzo forte right below the treble staff, and piano right below the bass staff. So this means that the right hand is a bit louder than the left, right? In between mezzo forte and softly piano. So balance this so that the left hand is dynamically, in terms of volume, lower than the right. First two measures only. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, wonderful. Now, these two measures are identical to these two measures in the second system. So out of our complete 8-measure piece, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we've learned 4 measures. We're done with half the piece. That's great news. Time for a break, right? Now, let's just barrel through and get through this. Measure 3 and measure 4. We already know the left, the chord change from G7 to C. So let's examine the right. The right hand plays a series of unisons. What note is this? The first space below the staff, treble clef? Well, that's a step below this E, so this is D and finger number 2. Right, with the same rhythm, quarter, quarter, half, that we have here, quarter, quarter, half, and we continue with measure number 4, where we go back up to E, right, same E as this, same E as that, on line number 1, and then skip up, or to the right on the keyboard, to G. Remember, that's your reference pitch on line number 2 for the treble or the G clef. So fingers 3, 5, 5. And notice the consistency of that quarter, quarter, half, quarter, quarter, half, quarter, quarter, half rhythm, right? That's what makes this so easy to remember, because there are so many things that simply recur, like the same rhythms, for example, or series of unisons, what have you, or even just the very limited harmonic vocabulary, because we only have 2 chords, C and G7, right? That's what makes this nice and easy to sing, easy to remember, easy to play. So let's play these 2 measures in the right hand only. So again, remember the fingers, 2, 2, 2, 3, 5, 5. Okay, so let's play that. Right hand, 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, release. Okay, those are the measures 3 and 4 in the right hand, and we're going to add the left hand to it. And so my recommendation is, if you're really, really not comfortable coordinating the hands just yet, start with each measure separately. So this is measure 3, G7, remember B, F, G, big friendly giant in the left hand, and second finger in the right. So it's going to sound like this. 1, 2, ready, and lift. Okay, it may really be okay in isolation, but what's going to be ultimately difficult is playing the entire first system with both hands together, where you're not only changing the melody in the right hand, but also worried about the ties in the left and the chord change from C to G7 back to C in the left. None of that is easy when you're a first-time pianist, but I'm going to show you some ways to learn that reliably so that you don't make too many mistakes, at least initially. So measure number 3, again, D, or finger number 2 in the right hand, G7 in the left. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, release. And now let's take a look at measure number 4, which finds the left hand coming back to C, and the right hand plays E, finger number 3, skipping up to G. So here we go. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, so let's try something kind of challenging. Let's play measures 3 and 4 with both hands, one measure after the other. So as one complete unit, measures 3 and 4. 1, 2, ready, and. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, release. Okay, let's do that 2 more times, right? Again, the rule of 3. If you can do it 3 times, you can move on. 1, 2, ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And one more time. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay. It's always easier said than done. It's always easy to see someone demonstrating who's already learned the instrument. When you're new, it can be frustrating because it seems so straightforward, and yet why isn't it working for you? If that's the case. So if you're having trouble, remember that you can do a couple of things to kind of prime your brain and your fingers to be able to coordinate correctly. Here's one way. Play only the first beat in the right hand and then just sustain the left, as we've done before. So measure number 3 would sound like this. Ready, and. 2, 3, 4. Then do the same thing for measure number 4. Ready, and. 2, 3, 4. Now play the right hand by itself. 1, 2, for measures 3 and 4. 1, 2, ready, and. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, and then try putting both hands together again. Ready, and. Okay, there are a number of techniques, but let's go back to the very beginning of the system and play measures 1, 2, 3, and 4 with both hands together, and then kind of break it up to help if there are any coordination issues that you might be having. So the entire first system, both hands, here we go. 1, 2, ready, and. 3, 4. 3, 4. 3, 4, release. If that wasn't so straightforward for you, here's another method that might help. Again, we're just going for priming the brain to coordinate each hand with the other. Keep both hands on the piano, but only play the right hand. So the left hand just hangs out. All right, just going to stay like this, pretty static. Now the right hand's going to play 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, now reverse. The right hand will be in the right hand position of the C, the 5-finger position on middle C. It's a mouthful, right? And the left hand will just play the chords. So the right hand is static and hangs out, and the left hand plays 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, release. Okay, so we're just getting our brain to recognize that both hands stay on the piano, even if we're not playing together at the same time. Another method, going back to what we have already spoken about, what I've already taught you, is you can play only the first note of each measure in the right hand, releasing according to the fact that each one of those first notes is a quarter, here, 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 and here, all the while sustaining the left hand as indicated, and of course changing as indicated. So here's that method. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, release. And then of course, and this might sound like a cop-out, but ultimately it's all about practicing, which doesn't mean you just repeat, 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 because if you're repeating incorrectly and you keep making the same mistakes over and over again, you are learning those mistakes. And in fact, you're doing more damage than anything helpful, because by repeating mistakes, you're making it that much harder to climb out of that pit of mistakes back into some semblance of playing this correctly. So don't just practice and practice and practice and repeat and repeat and repeat because that's what you think contributes to correct playing. All that does is potentially reinforce mistakes. So if you're going to be repeating, it has to be very thoughtful, it has to be with intention, and it has to be correct. So once you've learned to play any one of these measures, either as single unit measures or as units of 2, 3, 4 measures as a group, once you play them correctly, take a moment to assess that you've played them correctly, that you can play them again correctly, and only then should you repeat. So everything with complete concentration and the intention to play correctly. And then it's not a question of how much time do you practice, but rather how efficient and careful and meaningful is your practice. 5 minutes of concentrated, effective practice is better, more meaningful, and ultimately will lead you to greater success than hours of meaningless practice. That's just a waste of time. So let's play the first system one more time, both hands together, and then we'll move on to the second system and then complete this lesson by looking at Largo, which actually is very similar to Merrily. So first system one more time. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, now I've already observed that these two measures in the second system are identical to these two measures, so we don't have to learn them. Let's just take a look at the last two measures. So the chord change in the left hand is the same, G7 over to C. You can see that by the chord symbols at the top of the staff. The right hand part is a bit different, right? So we recognize this as D, finger number 2, back up a step to 3, down a step to 2, E down to D, and then finally D, or finger 2, down to finger 1 on middle C. So the last two measures, 4/4 and a whole note, sound like this, right? It's D, twice, up to 3, down to 2, down to 1. Okay, so let's play that rhythmically in time. Last two measures only in the right hand. 1, 2, ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, release. Let's play all of system number 2 only in the right hand, right? You remember that the first two measures are identical to what we've done before, but just as a quick review, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3. Okay, now to be very efficient with our practice, put the left hand down, but just don't play it. Second system, right hand only. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, let's try another round of that, but this time the left hand is going to do something just a bit different. It's not going to play, you're not going to press down to create sound, but you are going to just gesturally communicate visually to yourself, and in this case, for me to you, that there is a chord change in the third measure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to approximate that change by lifting, remembering the position of that G7. It kind of looks like this as a hand shape, right? Here are F and G, and here's the fifth finger extended. So I'm just going to kind of lift, change into that new position, and then in the last measure, go back to my first position for that C, E, G, C major triad. If I make a mistake or I'm kind of approximate, that's okay, because I'm not really playing. I just want my brain and body to know that I'm going to be affecting a chord change in those places. So the right hand plays, and the left hand sort of gestures to the chord changes. 1, 2, ready, and. 2, 3, 4, release. That might actually be much more awkward and much more difficult than just playing that chord change, but try it, because you are learning how to coordinate two separate activities and basically engaging the two hemispheres of the brain. It's really a brain exercise, if anything. So here we go. Let's try to play the last system, measures 5 through 8, with both hands simultaneously. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and. 2, 3, 4, release. So if that's not running smoothly just yet, remember that you can also switch back to playing the left hand while the right hand just hangs out in this position. So we've already tried that with the first system. So you're just playing 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't forget the tied notes. And G7, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, release. And then the various exercises we tried, like playing the first beat of the right hand while the left hand sustains. Right? You remember this. We did this for the first system, so there's no need to do it again here. let's play the entire piece, okay, from beginning to end. So here we go. All of Merrily we roll along, or Mary had a little lamb. Remember, the right hand is mezzo forte, the left hand is piano. Remember those ties. Don't forget and accidentally do this. That is not correct. And when I say it's not correct, what I mean is it's not indicated in the music. And so we're learning how to actually follow music notation. So if we care about such things, then because the ties are indicated, you should not be re-articulating the C major triad in measures 2 and 5, the second measure of each system. Here we go, the whole thing. 1, 2, ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release. Now, you might be really good with each system by itself, but where you might have had a moment, potentially that tripped you up, is actually continuing from measure 4 in the first system to measure 5, the beginning of the second system. In other words, just bridging the two systems or connecting them together. How do you work on that? You play measure 4 and measure 5 only. So you might start this way, just the right hand. Here's measures 4 and 5. Left hand, remember, to be maximally efficient, it's already present, just on the keyboard. Measures 4 and 5, right hand, 1, 2, ready, and. And don't continue as much as you want to, right? Because we're going to be super efficient. Then play just the left hand. 1, 2, ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release, right? We're just doing those two measures, measures 4 and 5. And the left hand is playing the same chord. Just remember, because it re-articulates here, remember to lift and play it again. It's what we talked about on page 33. Let me remind you, here, with Here's a Happy Song, in this spot right there, you might remember I talked about that trampoline, the C major chord going up and down, right? That buoyancy that I mentioned. So the same thing here. It gets the end of the measure up and down right there, okay? So now, let's try playing measures 4 and 5 back to Merrily on page 35 with both hands together. 1, 2, ready, and. And then it goes on. Okay, so once you feel comfortable with that bridge, then go back and play the entire piece from beginning to end one more time. And there are no repeats indicated, so once is fine. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, so that is, in essence, how to work through Merrily. Let's take a look at Largo. This, by the way, is a piece of symphonic music by the Czech composer Antonin Dvorak, and it's actually the first classical piece aside from Ode to Joy, right? That's presented earlier in the book, and that melody is by Beethoven. This is the only other classical piece that's thus far been introduced, and this is from Dvorak's New World Symphony from the second movement, which, here it is, which I highly recommend you look up. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece, and you'll hear it in just a moment. So a lot of this is similar to what you've already done. Maybe not identical, but similar enough. For example, the first two measures sustain that C major triad in the left hand. Then, what makes this actually somewhat easier than what happens here is that then you sustain the G7 triad. I was about to say triad, wasn't I? The G7 tetrachord for the next two measures. And then these two measures are exactly like these two, just like these two were the same as these two. You see patterns in this book tend to repeat. And then we have a chord change that is exactly like this one and like this one. So this system, in terms of the left hand, you've already learned. C, G7, C. It's not going to take you much to just sustain the G7 tetrachord, or just chord, for two measures. So let's begin with a very simple exercise. We're going to play only through the left hand while counting with the right hand. Like I might snap, or you can just count out loud. So this is Largo, the entire piece from beginning to end, just the left hand. All right, so here we go. One, here, I'll move this up here. Remember, it's piano throughout. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, G7, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, second system, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, switch to G7, 2, 3, 4, and C, 2, 3, 4, release. So that was kind of the easy part, actually, because now we have to look at the right hand and then worry about coordination. So let's learn this in groups of 2 measure units. Unit number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. What's actually fairly straightforward about the first 3 units is that the right hand plays while the left hand only articulates and sustains once. Only here, and here, and here. This will be a bit more challenging, but this is very similar to what you've already learned up here, so it shouldn't be as hard as it might at first appear. Let's take a look at the right hand for unit number 1, measures 1 and 2. What are these letters? E, G, G, E, D, C. What's the fingering? 3, 5, 5, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's not delay. Let's play that with the right hand. Okay, so remember to do this in rhythm. Just the first 2 measures. 1, 2, ready, and 3, 5, 5, and 3, 2, 1, and release. Okay, try with the left hand. Just even if you're not feeling too comfortable with this yet, force yourself just a little bit, challenge yourself. Here we go, first 2 measures, both hands. 1, 2, ready, and. Release, okay? So you see what I mean. The left hand only has to do one thing. It has to, well, 2 things. It has to articulate on the first beat of measure 1 with the right hand, and then it sustains for 2 complete measures. So 2 things to worry about. So as the right hand plays, just make sure the left hand is glued down. So let's play that one more time. First 2 measures only, both hands. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, release. Okay, let's go on to the next 2 measures. Looking at the right hand only, what are the letters? First space below the staff is D, up a step is E, you're skipping up from a line to a line is G, skipping back down to E, and stepping down to D. What are the fingers? 2 on D, 3 on E, 5 on G, back down to 3 on E, and 2 on D. And just make a quick observation. I wasn't going to say a pun. Make a quick note. Quick observation about the rhythm. 4 quarters, and a whole note. So here we go. In the right hand only, you're going to play measures 3 and 4, and remember, we're being as efficient as possible, so we're keeping the left hand down to prime our brain that eventually we're playing all of this with both hands together. Measures 3 and 4, right hand plays only. 1, 2, ready, and 2, 3, 4, release. Remember, 2 on D, 3 on E, 5 on G, 3 on E, and 2 on D. Okay, now let's actually try this with the left hand, which you know is playing G7. And just like the first unit of measures 1 and 2, the left hand does 2 things only. It comes down at the same time as the first beat of measure 3 in the right hand, and then sustains through 2 complete cycles of 4 beats. So let's try playing that at the same time. This is measures 3 and 4, both hands. 1, 2, ready, and. 2, 3, 4. Okay. Let's try playing measures 1 through 4, or units 1 and 2. Okay, so this is the hard part, because you have to worry about the chord change in the left hand. But let's just see how it works. All right, so I'll play it with you, or you watch me play it, and then you try measures 1 through 4, both hands. 1, 2, ready, and. 2, 3, 4, release. Okay. If it's not working, you play the right hand by itself while the left hand stays down. Then the right hand stays down and you play the left hand by itself. Another option is you play the left hand as is, but you only play the first beat of every measure in the right hand, as we've done before. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You notice an interesting pattern when you do that, right? When you kind of simplify the texture, you end up seeing that the first note of the first 2 measures in the right hand is the same, and the first note in the next 2 measures, measures 3 and 4, is the same in the right hand as well. It goes down to D. So we have this really kind of simple progression of, and then, right? It's actually really, really beautiful in its simplicity. And that's a great thing, right? Simple doesn't have to be a bad thing, and complicated doesn't have to be a bad thing. But sometimes there's beauty in simplicity, and I think that this piece demonstrates that really, really well. So I encourage you, go and look this piece up. Listen to the New World Symphony. Listen to that Largo, or what translates to slow movement, again by Antonin Dvorak. I think you'll really, really find it beautiful and compelling. So let's try playing the first system one more time, and then move on to the second, and then wrap this up. 1, 2, ready, and. 2, 3, 4, release. You might be wondering, why do I count at the end? Because I want to make sure that you hold out that whole note for its full durational value, a complete 4 beats. It's really important. A lot of students kind of get bored at the end and they just sort of trail off. That's not what's written in the music. And again, we care about the notation, so we're going to follow these rhythmic and pitch instructions. Play the right notes at the right time. Second system. First 2 measures, identical, both in the left hand as well as the right. E, G, G, E, D, C. Okay? And then the last two measures in the right hand are similar to what we've already done here, in that we start with D and go up a step to E. We did that already here. We started on D, went up a step to E, and then instead of going up by skip, we go back down by step, step down again to C, and then repeat. So the fingering here in the last two measures, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1. Same rhythms, 4 quarters and a whole note, so we can play the right hand right off the bat. Last two measures of the second system, 2, up by step to 3, down by step to 2, down a step to 1, and then unison repeat. And you hold for 4 full beats. Okay, so let's play the last two measures. The left hand will not be playing, it'll just be occupying this position, and the right hand will play in time. 1, 2, ready, and. 2, 3, 4, release. Now, if you want to get fancy, don't play the left hand, but mimic again or mime the chord change that occurs from the G7 chord to the C triad, or remember this, technically speaking, G7 over B tetrachord to the C major triad. All right, so let's see if we can do that. So we're miming this gesture of G7 to C without playing, and at the same time the right hand actually plays. So let's see what happens. Last two measures, 1, 2, ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, release. I'm going to play that one more time without talking over it, and notice the miming in the left hand. 1, 2, ready, and. 2, 3, 4, release. Let's try those last two measures again. This time the left hand will definitely play, and we're going to only play the first note of the right hand in each measure. So that's actually super easy for the last measure because you just put down that thumb or first finger on C4 and sustain together with the left hand. Okay. Last two measures, only playing the first note in the right hand while the left hand plays as indicated. 1, 2, ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, release. Try that a couple of times, and then let's play the last two measures with both the right and the left hands playing as notated. 1, 2, ready, and. 2, 3, 4, release. Okay, let's go back to the beginning of the second system and play all 4 measures with both hands. Okay, I know it's not easy, especially with that chord change from here to here, from C to G7. But remember, you got to lift a little bit and then come down. So practice the left hand by itself until you feel really comfortable going from C to G7 and then back to C. Second system, both hands. 1, 2, ready, and. All right, let's play the whole thing, the whole piece. And if you have any doubt about the connection from system 1 to system 2, practice it before you actually play the whole thing. So my recommendation is to actually play the following. Play measures 3 and 4, and then only measure 5 here at the beginning of system 2. This is just to get the bridge or the connection from first system to second. So it doesn't sound like you kind of pause here to recall and recollect what you have to play there. So I'm going to play measures 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to start with the right hand only. Remember, the left hand just stays down. 1, 2, ready, and 2, 3, 4. Okay, now I'm going to play the left hand only while the right hand stays down. Same 3 measures, measures 3, 4, and 5. Ready, and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You've got all this time while the left hand is simply being sustained. So think ahead, look ahead, so that you remember that you have to go from G7 to C. Okay, it's really crucial that you learn to look ahead. One of the key words I've been applying to all of these lessons, anticipate. Look ahead, anticipate. Let's play measures 3, 4, and 5 with both hands. 1, 2, ready, and 2, 3, 4. Okay, play that several times. My recommendation is 3, and then let's play the whole thing. Okay, the entire piece, Largo by Antonin Dvorak. No repeats, right? At the end, there are no double dots, just the double bar line, and the piece is over. Play it slowly, play it with feeling, with expression, and then listen to it as it's actually played by the symphony orchestra. 1, 2, ready, and. Remember, the right hand is louder than the left. Mezzo forte for the right hand and piano for the left. It's a beautiful piece of music, and I hope that you're happy, like I ended with the last lesson. I hope you're happy playing this music. So here's a challenge you might try. Go back to the beginning of page 35, the top of it, and play Merrily, We Roll Along, and then take a beat to kind of reset, and then play Largo. So let's play the entire page, just as a way of kind of summarizing this material before we continue on to the next lesson. So here is Merrily. 1, 2, ready, and. Here's Largo. It's a very helpful thing to do, to play more material as you get more comfortable playing the piano, because this teaches you how to focus and concentrate for longer and longer stretches of time. As you continue to learn how to play the piano, you're not just going to be playing pieces that are 30 seconds long or even a minute long. You want to get to the point where you can sustain your concentration for ever more increasing, or oh, that was awkward. I was in the middle of something so quasi-profound. You want to get to a point where you're able to extend your focus and your concentration for increasingly longer spans of time. And you do that by forcing yourself to play multiple pieces in a row. So another thing you can do is go back and play the two pieces on 33, take a beat as you turn the page, and then play the two pieces on 35. Or if you're really, really excited by this stuff, you're gonna go all the way back to, for example, page 30, play Jingle Bells, review that lesson if needed, take a beat, skip ahead to page 33, play these two pieces, and then play these two pieces on page 35. And you will find that you get more efficient with your thinking, and really significantly, and this is so, so important, you will be able to think ahead of where your hands actually are. So you might be playing the first measure of Merrily, but already thinking about the chord change for measure 3. You might be playing Merrily, but already in your head forecasting, previewing how you're going to execute Largo, the next piece on the page. These are crucial skills that all professional musicians possess. It's not just memory, but the ability to predict and anticipate what's coming next. So work on these things, and I promise you, you will get better.